just walk up here. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in. Well, good morning and welcome to All People's Church Unitarian Universalist. My name is Mary Kerwin and I'm serving as your co-celebrant in worship today. Having said goodbye to Reverend Annie recently, we're now several weeks into our interim period between ministers. Our plans for filling the pulpit during this time include hosting a number of guest speakers, and today we're happy to have Ashley Nguyen here to preach and lead our service. I'll have more information about Ashley in a minute, but first I have at least one announcement for you. Joe Burnham tells us that Don't Forget to Feed Me is having their month-long fundraiser until the end of July. You can see Joe Burnham or Carl Thibodeau with donations. So please, if you can, refer to the flyers posted around the church. Thank you, and please remember that even a little bit helps. Don't Forget to Feed Me is a project that we've been doing to help provide food to the cats and dogs at Eastside Ministries and other agencies within the neighborhood. Okay, now to introduce Ashley Nguyen to you. Ashley is entering her fourth and hopefully final year as a Master's of Divinity student at Bright Divinity School at TCU. She just completed her first year term as the moderator of the Bright Student Association. During this term, they've implemented a mentoring program which will connect new students with students who are further along in their studies to help them transition into the seminary environment. Ashley is also continuing work on structurally reforming the student government to be more representative of all student groups on campus. This is due to be completed by August. Ashley also continues to serve as a resident assistant at Liebrock Village, which provides affordable housing for graduate students at Bright and TCU. Before beginning her seminary career at Bright, she served as a youth pastor in a couple of Nazarene churches in Oklahoma, as well as serving as a child welfare specialist for the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. Some of Ashley's hobbies include playing guitar, playing rugby, dissecting nerdy sci-fi shows, and meeting new animals. Welcome to the pulpit, Ashley. I have no other announcements, so at this time we'll enter into a spirit of worship with music from our pianist.
Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through the noise and the busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night. In times of hope and despair. Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it, for it has no name and has many different names. The Spirit of love, the Spirit of compassion, the Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It's calling to you and it's calling to me. It's calling us to a greater wholeness, a greater connection, a greater service, and a greater love. It's calling us to heal the brokenness within ourselves and others and in the world. It's calling us to live more deeply. It's calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and to dance and to sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It's calling us to live courageously and kindly, and to speak our truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. It's calling us into community. It's calling us into the greater life of all. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling.
Now ask that you please stand for our chalice lighting, our opening hymn, and our spoken words of affirmation. The flame within the chalice is the primary symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. We light this chalice, symbolic of the warmth of community and the brightness that love brings to the world, illuminating our search for justice and peace. Light, that force that nurtures all living things, here in our midst in this flame, so tiny yet so significant. Please join in singing our opening hymn, number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. We'll do the first 3 verses, and the words are here on the screens, or you can follow along in the gray hymnal. Our affirmation: love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Please be seated.
All right. And at this time, I would like to invite anybody who's a child or a child at heart to come forward and come sit with me for our story of all ages today. All right. Remind me of your name. Remind me of your name. Eliza, nice to meet you. I'm Ashley. All right, so Eliza, today we're going to play a little bit of make-believe. Is that okay? And if you all want to join along with our make-believe story, please feel free to. All right, so how many of you have ever been to a baseball game? Yeah? Do you or anybody else have a favorite team? Yeah? What's your favorite team? Oh, yeah. Cool. Do we have any Rangers fans? I figured most of us, we're in Texas. How about Red Sox? Please. Yes, thank you. Awesome. So, well, in today's story, I have a little bit of bad news. Is that all right? So are we prepared for bad news? All right. So a word just came down from the governor, and I want to read it for us today. And it says this: hear ye, all citizens of Texas. Effective immediately, you are hereby notified that baseball is now illegal within our borders. From today onward, it is absolutely forbidden to watch baseball, to play baseball, or to even go to a baseball game. You can't even stand in your backyard with a ball and a bat. If you must, buy a frisbee or kick around a soccer ball. Now, don't ask why. We have reasons, and we mean it. No matter how old you are or which team you used to root for, you will be in huge trouble and will go to jail for a very long time if you watch or play baseball in the state of Texas, starting today. So, baseball is going to be illegal. What are we going to do? Let's pretend and just throw out some ideas about what we would do if baseball did become illegal, but we still love baseball and wanted to play it or watch it. What would you do? Do it anyway? Yell at the governor? I like that one. Protest. Ooh, I like that one. All right. So, all these are very possible ways to respond. And maybe this new law doesn't affect you, and so you shrug it off. And maybe the threat of prison scares you enough to stop, or to sneak around, maybe to leave Texas every time you want to hit a few balls, or even watch a team play. This may sound like a funny example to talk about, but there are countries where doing simple, everyday things are forbidden. A lot of the time, those forbidden things have to do with speaking your mind or practicing your religion. Imagine that you woke up tomorrow and you found out it was against the law to be a Unitarian Universalist, to come here and worship and have fun with all of us here, or to talk about UU beliefs. Now, would that be a pickle? Yeah, that'd be kind of an issue. And that's an issue that a lot of our ancestors has faced, because 500 years ago in Europe, people got tired of being told that there were only one way to practice religion. They began to read the Bible for themselves, and they thought about it, and which meant they started to come up with new religious beliefs. A few of them were our religious ancestors. They were part of a movement called the Radical Reformation, and they talked about a new belief today that we call Unitarian. And these brave people began to practice being Unitarians even though it's forbidden. Some of them said, I'll stop. It's not important to me. I'll go along with what we're supposed to believe. Some of them said, I'll be Unitarian in secret and trust. In public, I'll pretend to go along with whatever I'm told. And some of them said, I'm out here. And they left places it was most dangerous to be Unitarian and try to find countries where it was safer. And a few of them said, nope, I am going to do it anyways. Just like I heard someone yell, like, I'm just going to go watch baseball anyways. And all that's great. And the truth is, we needed all those early Unitarians. We needed the people who did it anyways, that spoke up to their beliefs. And we also maybe needed people who said, it's not that important because they got to make a choice. You'd be happy to know, granted, regardless of our little scenario today, that it's still legal to play and watch baseball here in Texas. But I hope you're happy to be Unitarian Universalists, and let's be grateful for the people throughout the past 500 years who made sure that we can inherit our faith and take care of it for generations. Thank you so much, and thank you all for participating. And at this time, we'll do our children's recessional.
Leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return. Every week in our church, we take up an offering. It's good to remind ourselves from time to time that the offering is symbolic as well as practical. We know that it is through pledges that we build our budget and fund our yearly programs and ministries of worship and religious education, pay our staff and professional religious leaders, and finance the comfort and beauty of our buildings and grounds. And we know that we could easily submit those pledge checks to the church at any convenient time. But we pass the plate during our worship service to make a community expression of thanks for the blessing of abundance, to visibly bring in the harvest at this most cherished hour of our week. Our offering says that the act of giving is as essential to our spiritual well-being as anything else we do here on Sunday mornings. We share the plate each week as well. This week, our Share the Plate recipient is the East Side Community Assistance. Our morning offering will now be given and received in the spirit of grateful fellowship.
Our first reading today comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, and I'm going to read the first 13 verses for us. And it reads this: He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many who heard him were astounded, and they said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done in his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense to him. Then Jesus said to him, "Prophets are not without honor except in their own hometown and among their own kin and in their own house." And he could not do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. He then went out among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals, and not to put on 2 tunics. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you, and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet, as a testimony against them." So they went out and proclaimed all that all should repent. They casted out many demons and anointed them with oil many who were sick and cured them. And at this time, if you all would join us for our hymn, hymn number 118, "This Little Light of Mine." I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light, I'm gonna let it shine everywhere I go. So wonderful. Thank you all. You may be seated. Our second reading for today is called "There's No Easier Way" by Elizabeth Nguyen. I once saw a little sign carved in wood that read, "There is only the hard way." Many of us have been harmed by theology that told us that suffering was a sacrifice that would bring us closer to God. Many of us were told that our suffering would redeem us, even when we knew that actual redemption would have been to be free from the suffering to begin with. Many of us are only here because of the sacrifices of others. So much of what is possible to carve out in this world requires some giving up, some letting go, and some sacrifice. That is the truth of that little wooden sign. There is no easy way. There is only the hard way. In particular, the work of justice often asks us to do impossible, hard, and terrifying things. There is no easier way. There is only this one hard way. Folks with more privilege sometimes get it caught up here. If it's hard, maybe we are doing it wrong. We tell ourselves. We are lulled by our experiences of choosing between the hard choice and an easier one. Folks with less privilege know that many of our choices are between a horrific choice and a horrific choice. we learn to live with that and keep going. Many of us want to do the right thing, the just thing, the generous thing, and also to not have to give anything at all. We want to share our opinions, but not actually donate our evenings, our weekends, our doing dishes while on a conference call to get to understand the work enough to be able to offer meaningful thoughts. We want people to trust us and to let us shape the vision, but not actually risk inviting folks out to tea or to dinner, beers, or church to build a relationship that endures and carries us forward. We want to post the cute meme without actually making the phone call to the city councilor or state representative. We want to be part of that powerful, courageous, game-changing direct action without long past midnight planning meetings, the messy decision-making, the frayed relationships, and the constant wondering if this is even worth it. We want to talk about being bound together in interdependence, but did not actually want to give our guest room to a stranger, give a paycheck to someone we've never met, and to turn our schedule inside out to do what needs to be done. The word sacrifice might be too much mess for some of us, too tainted by oppression and coercion. What matters more is that we are willing to live our lives in the shape of what is being asked. Not hope that what we are asked to do will fit to the shape of our lives.
Thank you. That's a great segue into our communion of names and milestones. We honor our time together with the shared stories and news from this congregation. Each week, there's a journal outside the entrance to the sanctuary where you can write a message of memory or hope. Also, at any time during our service, you are welcome to come forward and light a candle in our meditation center here at the side of our chancel. We're also reminded of the many people in the world who are burdened by sickness, hunger, and pain, by sorrow and anxiety, by violence and loss. We pause this morning to share our concern and care for these people, and also for those closer to home about whom we are concerned and with whom we celebrate. From our book of memory and hope, we have one announcement, and that is that Robert Redman, the son of Roy Redman, Robert grew up in this church, and Robert will be married next weekend in Portland, Oregon. Congratulations to the Redman family, and Robert especially. May the warmth of this community extend to all who are rejoicing or hurting in our wider world. The stories that live in this community are cherished, even when unshared, as we keep one another in mind during the coming week. We now ask you to pause for a few moments of quiet meditation to hold and uplift both the celebrations and the sorrows among us.
All right, so I know all y'all came here to become holy degenerates and figure out how to get kicked out of Walmart. So I have a guide for you. And if you're ever in Oklahoma City and have some time and some gas to kill, which I know gas is over $4 a gallon, that last one's a little hard to imagine having gas to kill. But you were ever interested in what kind of place could possibly mold this crazy girl standing in the pulpit in front of you? I implore you, drive west on I-40, drive past all the suburban pop-ups, past all the city lights and activities, and once you start seeing farmland go on for miles and miles, and where the cows overpopulate the humans, and oil rigs and truck stops are on every corner, you'll most likely be right around the place that I have called home for most of my life. Now, my town is not a small town in a traditional sense. My city was a county seat. We had just about any fast food restaurant you can ask for, lining up the main artery going through the city. My graduating class was probably closer to about 140 than some of these ridiculously small classes of 10 to 15 that I hear from actual small town people. But despite these big city anemones and its larger than normal small town population, it always still had that small town feel. Nothing ever changed. Even today, I go back home and everything's the same. And nothing is rarely built except for a new church. Everyone knew everybody else in their business, which got annoying. And the FFA kids were often the cool kids in school. And it was extremely easy to get one of my first summer jobs helping out on a farm to raise money for camp. But I think it's also important to point out that there's one thing about small towns that is dreadful for a person such as myself, and especially in my teenage years. It was awfully boring. Oh my gosh, everybody. Sure, there was ways to pass the time. Many kids my age often partied, drinking, smoking, chewing, doing drugs, just trying to forget the pain of being in a place so devoid of fun. But I couldn't do that. See, I was one of those really, really good kids. Hell, I even got elected the most religious for my senior year superlatives. How dorky is that? But I had a reputation to keep because of this. So what was there for me to do to pass the time? Sure, some of the other kids went out and got into gaming, which was fine. That was never my thing. And some of the other kids would get in their cars and drive for hours to go find some pretty lake or some trail to hike or to get some swimming in. But gosh, I was poor. I didn't have money to drive just to drive. So what was I going to do when I wasn't busy in school or doing my summer jobs or hanging out at church? Well, me and my friend group, because we were goody two-shoes, would often have to get creative in our destructive teenage activities. And one great thing about growing up in a town with at least some people in it was that there was a Walmart. But just going to Walmart was never creative enough for us. We didn't have enough money to go on endless shopping sprees. So we did what every good rebellious youth would do, which was act like crazy senseless youth and push the limits of the Walmart managers before they decided to kick us out. And trust me, they did. Now, mind you, we didn't steal anything or did things properly illegal because that isn't creative enough, let's be honest. But we did enough to catch the manager's attention and the attention of the good citizens of my hometown. Well, my current record of being kicked out of Walmart currently sits at 3 times. I always wondered if we could have done more when I was younger. maybe even the ultimate goal of being kicked out permanently. So as I was going down the nostalgic rabbit hole of my destructive youth tendencies the other day, I looked up some other creative ways that other people have gotten kicked out of Walmart. And I found this wonderful website called IHateWorkingInRetail.com. And I want to share these with you right now. And let's start. Number 1, take someone's shopping cart and switch the items with stuff from people next to them's cart. Number 2, you can walk up to complete strangers and say, "Hi, I haven't seen you in so long," etc., and see if they play along to avoid embarrassment. Number 3, you can smash the person in front of you on the head with a ham. Now, I don't know. That seems a little violent, doesn't it? Not very you. Number 4, go up to someone older and say, "Grandpa, you're still alive. It's a miracle." Number 5, take somebody else's shopping cart and say, hey, that's my shopping cart. And then when they fight back, call security and say that the other person was trying to take your stuff. Number 6, you can move a caution wet floor sign to carpet areas. I don't know how that would get you kicked out, but I guess their Walmart had an angry manager. Number 7, you can hide in the center of the closed circle. And when people stop by to find shirts, you can jump out and yell, "Ah!" Number 8, you can go into the dressing room, wait a few minutes, and then yell, "There's no toilet in here," and see what happens. Number 9, you can get a Batman costume, put it on, and run around the store screaming at the top of your lungs, "Come, Robin, to the Batmobile." And this last one is my personal favorite because it's straight out of the Ashley Nguyen Degenerate Playbook. You can take a bunch of stick horses, ride around the store making horse clapping noises. You know the kind, yeah. And just ride around the store with your stick horses. And when you find your favorite aisle, ours was the produce aisle, you can post up in it and demand the toll in your best British voice from innocent shoppers. And when the manager comes to put it to an end, you challenge them to a duel. So, after reading all these tips, I really hope that you feel emboldened and empowered to go out and be good little human hoodlums getting kicked out of Walmarts all over the metro area. And if all you ever want to do is get kicked out of Walmart, the sermon ends right now. It's over. You are welcome to walk out and leave, but I have a sneaking suspicion that this group wants to do more, right? I never imagined all peoples to be a congregation that simply stopped at being mediocre. That's the whole reason why I kept coming, because the moment I walked in this congregation, I knew they wanted to go farther. And trust me, getting kicked out of Walmart is child's play. Anybody can do it. But there are far bigger places you can get kicked out of. And if you want to be the LeBron James or the Michael Jordan of holy degenerates, then keep listening, because there is not a place to get kicked out of that is more fascinating than your hometown. And earlier, I read from a reading from the Gospel of Mark, which serves as a perfect example of the Holy Grail of places get kicked out of. When we enter this story, there's a bunch already going on. This man named Jesus is already making a ruckus all over the region, claiming love for all humans. What? Caring and healing for the sick. And then just before Jesus returns to his hometown, he raises Jairus' daughter. So, like any small town nestled in a also very small country, you can imagine that word is getting around about the son of a carpenter has been doing out in surrounding cities. But in the story, he returns home and he's with his disciples. And we'll get to the disciples later. It's very important, so remember that. I imagine that after he returned home, and since his name is getting around, that they offered him a chance to teach in a synagogue. We are not told what Jesus said during the lesson, though we can probably figure it out by comparing his message with similar ones in other gospels. But I don't want to do it here. I kind of want to leave that blank. If only because I think the author is trying to do something special here and allow us to fill in the blank for the writer with their own little special messages. But even though we don't know what Jesus has said during this moment, in the context of the Gospel of Mark, we do know his hometown reaction to his message. And I want to revisit the passage real quick, starting at verse number 2. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in a synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did the man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done in his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense to him. There's one word that stood out to me while going through this passage, which was the word astounded. Now, I probably heard way too many times that this word being translated in a positive sense by some Bible scholars. They give a layer of awe and wonder to his words, almost like the community's entire world had been changed as a result of Jesus saying whatever he said, and that at some point after their positive astonishment, somehow some evil spirit fell on them and they turned their back to Jesus. But I don't think that's so. I want to take another approach with the word astounded. And I believe that the moment Jesus said what Jesus said was supposed to say, I believe that his community was pissed off at him. I think that whatever Jesus had said had so rubbed against the normal way that they understood that their world and the role that they in it and was entirely changed. And like any large grouping, their collective fears were being attacked. See, I believe this because in the next verse they say, "Is this not the carpenter's son of Mary?" See, this might seem innocent enough, but it isn't. Because to call somebody the son of their mother instead of their father would have been seen as an insult in that culture and served as a direct insult also on the lineage and uncertain birth circumstances of this man. Both of these verses show us that whatever Jesus had said, it made people of his hometown enraged. Enraging your hometown is not easy to do, especially as small as town of Nazareth where Jesus had grown up. See, remember, if you ever came from a small town, everybody knows everybody. They probably had known Jesus most of his life. They'd watched him grow up. I even imagine that people in his town helped babysit him, helped him patch up his boo-boos when he fell off his ancient Mediterranean bike a little too far away from his home. And I also imagine that the whole town threw a big going away party when he decided that he was going to wander off and start his ministries. They were all part of his upbringing, and I imagine they had love for this man just as much as his family did. That is why it's so hard to get kicked out of your hometown. And while this passage doesn't say he was kicked out, we can imagine from context and comparison to other writings that he was either kicked out or made to feel unwelcome. Within a span of one set of words coming out of Jesus' mouth, he ceased to be the child they all watched grow up in front of his eyes into an enemy, seeking to tear down their entire culture and way of life. So, when we ask about what was it that Jesus said that made him so enraged, I think that the reason people were so enraged with Jesus was because he had the courage what's needed to be said, regardless of the audience. I don't believe that Jesus minced his words because it would upset dear old Susan. Sorry for Susans in here. He didn't filter his language because it would cause the synagogue board to get pissed off at him and no longer invite him back. I believe he stood up to say what needed to be said. So, what is it in our context here in Texas and in America that needs to be said? The truth is, I'm not entirely sure, because there are so many issues in our world that need to be addressed. Women were just stripped of their right to govern their own bodies. Local and state governments are actively trying to make it harder for marginalized voices to be heard. Some groups are even asking that gay people be stripped away of their right to marry the person who they love. Children are being banned from sports and safe bathrooms from school just because of the gender they identify as. People are clamoring to force children to be taught whitewash history. Black transgender women currently have a lifespan of 35 years, according to some estimates, and are being killed in droves, it seems. These issues are rampant, and there are too many. And unfortunately, the voices that are speaking up against these injustices seem to grow smaller and smaller by the day. I think that the reason for this is fear and comfort. We fear ostracization from the ones we love. We fear backlash that we will get. We fear what would happen if those in power ever figured out what we had spoken up against, what they will do to us. And I guess on some level that's understandable. We want to survive, not just physically, but also emotionally and socially. But I think our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to do something more. I think our Unitarian Universalist faith demands us to do more than simply sit back and watch the world burn before us. I think our UU faith asks us to have courage, just like this Jewish man did 2,000 years ago, to stand up and say what needs to be said in order to demand that changes be done to care for and love all those in the margin of our communities. There are UU churches sending out people to stand up in city council meetings. There are UU churches who are on the front lines of the women's rights movements to make decisions for their own bodies. Well, hell, you all invited a trans woman up in pulpit today. You know how uncommon that is? I imagine I couldn't preach in most of the churches here in America, regardless of denomination. The Unitarian Universalist faith has had the courage to speak in the past, and I truly believe that we will have the courage to continue to speak up for what needs to be said and to fight for what needs to be fought for, because our churches in this faith have had the courage in the past to do so. So if you want to get kicked out of your hometown, that's how you do it. By saying what needs to be said. By fighting for what needs to be fought for. But I want to acknowledge real quick that it isn't easy to be socially ostracized. To have many people who love you, care for you, who have watched you growing up, say cruel words and make you feel unwelcome because you stood up for your beliefs. Which is why I included in this guide a little opportunity for self-care. Looking back on our reading, the later verses seem to shift in the storyteller's narrative, but I think they are intricately connected. See, when Jesus commissions his disciples to go out to have the courage to say what needed to be said in other towns, he didn't send his disciples out by themselves, but with somebody else. Not just for safety, right? We go to protests most likely with other people so we can keep ourselves safe. We watch out for each other. And I'm sure there was a lot of that Let's make sure we protect each other. But I also think that Jesus did this because Jesus knew the pain of being ostracized and hurled out of an entire city, and that in order to process all the pain that they would need each go through in all these towns, I imagine that the disciples, after leaving, would unload all their anger and frustration on one another. A mini counseling session right there, right next to you, while you're walking to the other city. And to do this so that they can truly dust off their feet and move on to the next city. My lovely people at All Peoples, we do not have to be courageous alone. We can be courageous together. We can speak up and be the support system for one another, regardless of the social action plan that we decide to pursue together or individually. We can have this courage because we have the courage to reach out and support one another. This congregation can be the place people go when they are suffering from emotional heartbreak of being the LeBron James of getting kicked out of their hometown. That can be this place. So, I implore you today to go. Go and have the courage to be holy degenerates. Don't just stop at getting kicked out of Walmart, but to have the courage to safely and boldly say what needs to be said, and have the courage to support and reach out to those who are on the front lines doing the same thing. All right. You'll join us for our... Oh, thank you. Well, if you would join us today for our closing hymn, it's Standing on the Side of Love, number 1014 in your gray hymnal. Blue hymnal. Why did I say gray?
not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
All right, if you will join me in this benediction. Go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long, and we can bend it towards justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustices in our daily lives and the larger world. Amen. Go in love, because a holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we transform our lives. And thank you all today for joining us in worship. Very exciting to get to preach for you all today. Thank you so very much. And if you all would join us there in the library for coffee and conversation, and thank